The nation's opioid crisis has hit Philadelphia hard. On today's episode, we'll talk to a public health official who can share what is being done at the local level to slow the epidemic and save lives. Later, we'll find out how a city program is working to prevent our youngest citizens from causing fires and why kids play with fire in the first place. We have all this and more, so stay tuned to Freedom from Fire. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Freedom from Fire. I'm today's host, Crystal Yates, and I'm the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for EMS. Here at Freedom from Fire, we aim to improve your quality of living by giving you fire and life safety information. We also introduce you to our local safety partners. In the first half of our program today, I'll speak with a member of Philadelphia's Department of Public Health about the opioid crisis, as well as the use of Narcan. Later in the show, I'll talk to a member from our fire prevention unit who manages the Youth Firesetter Intervention Program. Now, we've all seen in the news how opioid addiction is running rampant throughout the country. The latest mortality data from the CDC show that deaths from drug overdose are up among men and women across all races and ages. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, opioid overdoses accounted for more than 42,000 deaths in 2016. In Philadelphia, for the same year, opioid overdoses accounted for 3 times the number of deaths from homicide. And Pennsylvania is one of the 5 states with the highest rate of death due to drug overdose. Given her line of work, my first guest knows all too well about the public health effects of opioid use disorder. Please welcome the Opioid Surveillance Program Manager at the Philadelphia Department of Public Health, Dr. Kendra Viner. Welcome, Kendra.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So, tell us about yourself.
Well, prior to 2017, I ran the viral hepatitis program at the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. And it was really in more recent years of this program that we were struck by how many young people were becoming infected with hepatitis C. And what we realized in interacting with these individuals is that a lot of them were active injection drug users. And we actually even found that in the process of providing intervention, a lot of those patients had died from overdose. And so that was really my first exposure to the opioid crisis. In early 2017, the mayor of Philadelphia, Mayor Kenny, created a task force to address the epidemic. And the goal of the task force was to come up with an action plan for the city as to how to address the crisis. And one of the recommendations as part of that task force was to develop an opioid prevention and surveillance program. And so that's how this program that I now help to run was formed.
Oh, great. Kendra, how did we get to the point of an opioid epidemic? Like, how did we get here in Philadelphia?
Right. Well, in the 90s, pain became thought of as the 5th vital sign. And it became important for doctors to address pain issues among patients. And so there was a lot of pressure on them to come up with mechanisms for dealing with pain. And opioid painkillers have been known for a long time to be highly effective, and so were begun to be prescribed in higher and higher amounts. They are very effective, even now, obviously, at dealing with acute pain, but along with increased use of painkillers, there's an increased risk of addiction as well. And unfortunately, drug cartels seized on this opportunity of this sort of new population of people who were addicted to painkillers, and went into those populations and offered illicit forms of opioids, especially heroin, which is cheaper and potentially more accessible for individuals who were addicted to painkillers.
And so I guess my next question would be, why are they dangerous? Like, what makes opioids so dangerous?
Right. Well, opioids act on receptors in the brain that help to inhibit our responses to pain, but at the same time, they also encourage the release of, or induce the release of endorphins and make us feel good. And so while they can be very effective at reducing acute pain conditions, prolonged use can actually make us want to take more of them and become addicted. So that's the issue, really.
Okay. And so how has the epidemic affected the region, Philadelphia, locally?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Philadelphia is really caught in what we consider a perfect storm of issues. So prescription opioid use is very, very high in Philadelphia and has been for several decades. In addition, the heroin in Philadelphia is particularly pure and cheap. It's actually the purest and cheapest in the country. Wow. So the combination of those two factors, along with the recent influx of fentanyl, which is a manufactured form of an opioid that can be mixed with heroin, has really created this kind of perfect storm of events in Philadelphia.
And fentanyl is a little stronger than heroin?
Fentanyl is many times stronger than fentanyl, or sorry, than heroin. Yep.
And so what do you think the community's perception of the crisis, the epidemic is?
Well, I think by this point, most people in Philadelphia have had either direct contact with someone who is affected by opiate use disorder or who has had an overdose or knows someone who has. And so it's really affecting every population geographically and demographically in Philadelphia. And in addition, I think, especially recently, there's been a lot of media coverage in the Philadelphia Inquirer and local news stations about the opioid epidemic, in large part because of the number of overdoses that have occurred. So there were 1,200 in 2017, which was up from just over 900 in 2016.
Wow, so it's growing, and do you think it's going to continue to grow, or what do you think is going to happen?
Well, the city is taking a lot more action across several fronts now, both from a law enforcement and public safety standpoint and from a public health and behavioral health standpoint to try and stem the epidemic. So our hope is that we've reached the peak and we'll start to see a drop in overdoses, but time will only tell when we've reached the peak of the epidemic.
So as a partner to the health department, I know that you guys are doing some education. You're educating the public. Can you share some of what you guys have been doing?
Sure. So in terms of education about the risks of using opioids, we've launched 2 waves of a campaign that's called Don't Take the Risk, which features Philadelphians from all walks of life who have had issues with addiction to prescription painkillers and have also witnessed or been in relationship with someone who has had an overdose related to opioids.
And so is the education targeted to prescription opioids and illicit forms of the drug?
It is, and I think the message is just don't take the risk of using opioids to deal with especially chronic pain conditions. So talk with your doctor about other forms of pain mediation that are maybe not as risky as opioids.
So one of the things that the public is aware of is Narcan or naloxone. Can you tell us a little bit about Narcan?
Sure. So naloxone is an opioid antagonist. So it binds to the same receptors as opioids do, and it blocks the effect. And so by doing that, it blocks the effect of opioid both on pain, but also on the perception of the good feelings, the endorphin rush that comes from opioids. And it can be used to reverse overdose if someone has taken too much overdose or too many opioids.
So I know in the Philadelphia Fire Department, every single one of our engines carries naloxone, all of our ladder trucks carry naloxone, our medic units. Is naloxone available outside of that? Are there any other agencies carrying and using naloxone?
Yeah, so we actually encourage anyone in the community who is having any kind of contact with someone who may be at risk of addiction or overdose to carry naloxone on their person. So naloxone is very easy to learn to use. We just encourage that anyone who considers using or carrying naloxone to get trained. And so if you go to our website, which is www.phillynaloxone.com, you can get information not only about what naloxone is and where to get it, but also information about training dates if you're interested in getting trained on how to use it.
So is it safe? Like, if I wanted to carry naloxone, should I worry about it getting into the hands of somebody else? What if somebody didn't overdose on an opioid?
It's completely safe. So it can be used on someone who's overdosing from another substance and it will have no effect.
And who would be permitted to carry naloxone? You said anybody that has a loved one that, or somebody they're connected to. Mm-hmm. So how could I get naloxone?
So the easiest way is really to go to your local pharmacy. Right. Most commercial and local pharmacies do carry naloxone, and most insurance companies will cover the cost with very little, and in fact, in some cases, no copay. If you're uninsured, there are some agencies such as Prevention Point Philadelphia where you can obtain naloxone for free.
Oh, great to know. Mm-hmm. So what should the average citizen know about the opioid use disorder?
I think the most important point that we at the Public Health Department like to convey is that opiate use disorder is a chronic disease, just like diabetes or heart disease, and that we need to treat people who have opiate use disorder with compassion and really do our part as citizens to help individuals who are addicted to start their journey into treatment.
So if someone has opioid use disorder, what type of treatments are available to them and how might they access those treatments?
Right. So the treatments that have been shown to be most effective are medication-assisted treatments. So these might include naltrexone, Vivitrol, buprenorphine, otherwise known as Suboxone, and methadone. Those are three different treatments. And they're all very effective at reducing the urge to continue to take opioids, mm-hmm. As well as the side effects from opioid withdrawal. What we also encourage people to do is that if they are induced onto medication-assisted treatments, that this is given alongside counseling and other behavioral health treatment as well. And so I should also mention that much more information about treatment options in Philadelphia is available at the Department of Behavioral Health's website.
Okay. So you did mention earlier that you were part of the mayor's opioid task force. Can you talk a little more about that, maybe some of the recommendations that came out of that task force? Sure.
So the mayor's task force had 5 subcommittees. There was a harm reduction subcommittee, a data sharing subcommittee, a treatment subcommittee, a criminal justice subcommittee. I feel like I'm forgetting one, but that covers most of them. So the recommendations were mainly, they sort of covered the entire gamut of the opioid crisis, from providing more prevention and education materials to the community, through preventing overdose by getting more naloxone into the hands of first responders and into the prison system, from better linkage into treatment for people who've had a non-fatal overdose and ended up in an emergency department or been reversed by naloxone by a first responder in the field, and then also enhancing treatment options within the community. So they really covered the entire gamut.
Thank you. One of the things that I noticed in some communities, there's a cultural concern about the mayor's task force and what we're doing with opioids, and I hear it a lot, and I'd like to have you address it. But during the crack era in the 1980s, people feel that it was criminalized more than what's happening with opioids. So can you talk a little more about that?
Sure. I mean, I think we as a nation, so Philadelphia and nationally, made a huge mistake in the way that we responded mm-hmm. during the crack era. And I think, now during this new epidemic, we have the opportunity to respond differently. and really show that, show compassion again to individuals who have problems with addiction, rather than creating it, treating them as having some kind of criminal, bent.
Right. It's almost like just because you did something wrong once doesn't mean you have to do it wrong again.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, Kendra, thank you so much for coming. Is there any message you'd like to give to the public before you go?
I think, again, just to reiterate that individuals with opiate use disorder are people just like you and I who have a chronic disease, and really emphasizing compassion and help is really the critical point that the health department would like to make.
Well, thank you so much for coming. Please remember, if someone has taken drugs and becomes unresponsive, call 911 immediately for help. If you or someone you know is suffering from addiction to opioids, please obtain naloxone or Narcan through your pharmacy, because you might be able to save a life. You can also call the Pennsylvania Get Help Now hotline at 1-800-662-HELP for information about treatment resources. So we're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll learn about the city's Youth Firesetter and Intervention Program. Please don't go anywhere.
According to statistics, 40 million adults suffer from depression or anxiety. 1 in 4 college students are affected by this as well. You never know who is going through something, so you should always be kind to one another. A little kindness can go a long way. It might even save a life.
Hook to the dollar feature and you're on my mind. Return of the creature that crawled up from the subway line. You're always keeping me waiting, keeping me waiting for you.
Welcome back to Freedom from Fire. I'm your host, Assistant Deputy Commissioner for EMS, Crystal Yates. According to the National Fire Protection Association, between 2007 and 2011, there averaged over 49,000 reported fires every year to children playing with fire. Lives are lost and property is damaged every year as a result of youth fire setting. In order to prevent further destruction and injury and to intervene with those youth who are already setting fires, there is a program designed to educate children and reduce risk. Firefighter Lisa DeSamour from our Fire Prevention Division heads our Youth Firesetter and Intervention Program. She's here to tell us more. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with what made you join the fire department and how long have you been working for us?
So it's interesting because whenever I get this question, I always think back to other folks answering that. Oftentimes people have a pretty cool and elaborate story. I myself do not have one, other than the fact that it was literally stumbled on.
Okay.
So I was working in Center City. I met up with the recruiter who happened to be in City Hall, passing through. I believe I was on my lunch break, and he approached me with information. Initially, I wasn't too interested, but figured, okay, I'll fill it out. Kind of sort of fast forward through the timeline, kind of went through the motions, filled out the booklet, did the city physical exam, interview process, the whole nine, got into the academy, and fell in love there. It was a love-hate relationship first, but then it became where it was, wow, this is what I was meant to do.
This is a great job, right?
Absolutely. When they say the best job in the world, they're not lying. And now have a little over 13 and a half years with the department. It's mind-blowing for me to be able to say that, but I love it. I love coming to work every day. Initially, out of the academy, I was stationed at Engine 11. I was there roughly about 7 to 8 months. I put in a transfer, got my transfer to Engine 45, loved it there, loved it, loved it, loved it. I feel like I grew up there, learned so much there, and then got transferred, actually put in a request for transfer to fire prevention, and have been there, it'll be 3 years in April.
So fire prevention, they are a nice jewel in the fire department. That unit does a lot of work, and I don't think people sometimes understand just how much work you do in fire prevention.
They don't. They don't. Oftentimes, the misconception is that, okay, we're just doing smoke alarms. While that is an important, vital role in our unit, there's other things. I mean, we have our Youth Firesetters Program, Youth Firesetters Intervention and Prevention Program, along with a host of other fire prevention activities that we conduct.
So Lisa, why do children start fires? Like, why do children set fires?
That is an awesome question. I mean, when you think about it, the majority of youth set fires is just the natural result of a child's curiosity. I mean, we grow up with it surrounded in our life, not realizing it. So something as simple as blowing out birthday candles, watching mom or dad light the grill. If you have someone in the household that smokes cigarettes, lighting cigarettes, candles, the list goes on and on and on. So that curiosity is piqued at a really young age.
So then I guess the question would be, when does that curiosity turn into a problem?
It turns into a problem when it goes unaddressed. So oftentimes you'll hear different reasonings. You'll hear, it's natural, which it is, boys will be boys, or they're kids, and I did it when I was young and everything was okay. I think what parents need to understand is that when it's addressed young, oftentimes then we've intervened, we've done our job. When it's unaddressed, it can progress into something more serious.
So what type of tips would you give to, I'm a parent of a young child, what type of tips would you give to me to teach my child that setting fires is not the thing they want to do?
Good one. So I have my list here. Teaching our children about the power in fire. Fire is a tool. I mean, even as adults, we tend to think of fire in controlled situations, but we both know we can't predict it. It can become uncontrolled very fast. Teaching our children to make good decisions. I mean, it's pretty much proven that once you have positive family reinforcement, our kids tend to make better decisions. Teaching them the bigger picture. Setting a fire not only breaks the law, lives are lost, people are hurt, property is damaged, and the psychological effects last so long. Then you have increased supervision, making sure we stay on top of our kids, performing basic fire safety checks in the home. When you become active in practicing fire safety at home, kids see that and want to mimic that.
So the Firesetter Intervention Program, what does that involve?
So it's actually, I should say, strictly education modules.
Okay.
So once we have a kid in our program, it's tailored to that particular child, for their age, for that particular incident, and parent involvement is vital, absolutely vital.
So then what's your role as the manager of the program?
So as manager, I'm overseeing our specialists. We have 2 specialists within our unit. I'm a specialist as well. What sets me apart from the specialists, I'm implementing programs as far as, what education modules will be used. Are we teaching burn safety for this particular individual? Are we going to teach basic, fire safety, basic fire science? Most children can retain that particular information.
So how would a parent get their child registered or involved in the program?
So something as simple as a phone call. I mean, we have our referrals, so in the field, our officers have the internal referral form. And then our outside resources, whether it's the school or mental health community or whomever, we have a referral form for them. The referral form pretty much just outlines basic information, but the parent actually has to make the phone call, speak with myself, one of the specialists, and then express interest from there, and then we can kind of get our schedules in sync that way.
So are there different categories of youth fire setters? Like, are there different categories of a child that plays with matches versus one that's actually set a fire?
So we have what we call typologies. There's 5 typologies. There's the basic curiosity, experimental. You have crisis. That's pretty much our kids who are troubled. It's a cry for help. You have our thrill seekers, risk takers. Then you have your delinquents. And then pathological. Those are the kids that have those thought disorders.
So what would you expect for a parent to do? Is the parent's role to be very involved in the program?
Completely involved. I mean, it's vital. It's actually contingent upon their involvement. They actually have to be present at each particular session.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I learned a lot.
Good,
and I work
good.
for the fire department, so thank
Absolutely.
you very much.
Thank you.
Remember, if you would like to find out more about LaSalle TV, you can check out our social media sites. And if you are interested in learning about the Philadelphia Fire Department, visit our Facebook, Twitter, and web pages. I would like to once again thank our guests for joining us today. I also would like to thank you for tuning in and watching. So until next time, remember, fire is everyone's fight. Stay safe and remain free from fire.